Danzhou Port is located to the east of Qinghua. Although it is close to the sea, due to the recent construction of several ports in the south, the expected sea route to the west has already been connected, so the country's trade center has moved to south. The port gradually showed its decadence. The once bustling port became quiet a few years ago. Seagulls fly freely, no longer harassed by those nasty sailors. The residents who originally lived in Danzhou Port did not feel that their lives had changed much. Although their incomes had decreased, His Majesty the Emperor had already exempted them from taxes for several years, so their lives were okay, and this seaport was very convenient. Beautiful, now it has become quiet again, and naturally more suitable for people to live. So occasionally some big shots would choose to build a manor here. But because it was too far away from Kyoto, there were not many officials who really stayed. The only ones who could barely be counted were probably the old lady in the courtyard in the west of the city. I heard that the old lady is the mother of Earl Sinan in the capital, and she chose to come here to retire. The residents of the city all knew that Earl Sinan seemed to be very favored by His Majesty the Emperor and had never been an exception in accordance with the law. Instead, he stayed in the Ministry of Finance in the capital to work, so most of them showed enough courtesy and awe to the courtyard. But children don't understand this. It was a sunny day, and the adults were sitting in the tavern enjoying the salty smell and moisture brought by the sea breeze, enjoying the salted plums and the drinks in the cups. There was also a group of teenagers gathered outside the stone steps of the back door of Count Sinan's residence in the west of the city. They were so densely packed that they didn't know what they were doing. Looking closer, I realized it was a very interesting scene. It turned out that these teenagers were listening to a child who was only 4 or 5 years old. The little boy is very beautiful, with picturesque eyebrows and extremely clear eyes. His voice is still mature, but his tone of voice is very old-fashioned. He just sighed and gestured with his little arms. Truman walked to the wall and found a ladder there, so he walked up step by step, found the door, and pushed the door open. Then what? Then, of course I will return to the human world. The little boy pouted, as if he was impatient that the boys who were older than him would ask such a mentally retarded question. No way. Wouldn't you go and do that and so on? Honey is dead. Another boy answered. Yes, didn't Truman go and beat up that honey to vent his anger? He was imprisoned like this for many years. The little boy shrugged. No. Hey, it's so boring, Master Fancian. Today's story is not as good as the stories from the past few days. Then what do you like to hear? A Misty Journey. Story of Style.
Bang!
The little boy named Fancian gestured with his middle finger to the children around him who were older than him. It's not healthy to fight and kill, and it's not environmentally friendly to dig for treasures. Suddenly, an extremely angry voice came from the courtyard. Master, where have you been? The children in a circle imitated him and gave the middle finger sign. But there were more people, so it looked more spectacular. They said in unison, boom, and then dispersed with smiles. The little boy named Fancian stood up from the stone steps, patted the dust on his buttocks, turned around and ran into the yard. But before closing the door, his sharp eyes glanced at the grocery store opposite. The young blind boss had complex emotions that were completely inappropriate for his age on his face, and then he gently closed the wooden door. This is Fancian's 4th year in this world. Over the years, he finally understood that he was not dreaming, and that he had really come to an unknown world. This world seemed to be the same as the world in his memory, but it seemed to be very different. By eavesdropping on the conversations of Earl Bep's servants, he finally understood his identity. It turned out that he was the illegitimate son of Earl Sinan of Kyoto. Just like other dramas about grudges between rich and powerful families, as an illegitimate child, it is easy for him to fall into the hands of his eldest aunt, second aunt, and the like, and his cheap father seems to have only one son. In order to continue the Earl's bloodline, he was sent to Danzhou Port, which is very far away from Kyoto. Over the years, he gradually became accustomed to his identity. Although it is said that an adult soul is trapped in the body of a child, it has to undergo a completely different experience, both physically and psychologically. If it were a normal person, he would probably go crazy. But luckily, in his previous life, Fanshin was a patient with myasthenia gravis. He had been lying on the hospital bed for many years. Now he only has some difficulty in moving. Compared with the miserable situation in his previous life, it was nothing. So he now lives in this child. There is not much discomfort in the body. The most uncomfortable thing is actually his current name. When he was 1 year old, the Earl of Kyoto sent a letter and named him Fansien, also known as Anji. It's a bad name. It sounds a lot like the curse word in his hometown, suspect. But he had the appearance of a child, so it was impossible to express his objection verbally. When I was being treated in a hospital in my previous life, I could still twist my head in the early stages, so I often begged the cute little nurse to buy me some pirated DVDs and books to read. After living in the Earl's mansion for a long time, although the old lady was cold on the outside and warm-hearted on the outside, she loved him very much in her heart, and the maids in the mansion did not treat him differently because of his identity as an illegitimate child. But the pain of having nowhere to communicate with others still made him somewhat unhappy. Can he tell the maid that he is from another world? Can you tell the teacher that you can actually recognize all the words in this book? So he often sneaked out of the side door of the Earl's palace and played with the children of the common people on the street. He mostly told them stories, including movies and novels from his own world. It seems that he wants to use this to remind himself of something, to remind himself that he does not belong to this world. In his world, there are movies, the internet, and YY novels. To this day, I don't know why, he talks about the movie The Truman Show. The plot of this movie is a bit dull, and there is no Jim Carrey playing cute, so he should know very well that these teenagers in Donjoport will never like it. But he spoke anyway, because he always had a sense of absurdity deep in his heart. He was obviously going to die, so why was he suddenly reborn in this body? I can't help but think of that movie. Maybe the people in front of me, the streets, and the seagulls flying in the sky were all arranged by others? Just like Truman. Truman finally discovered the falseness of the world he was in, so he resolutely took a boat and found the exit. But Fanshin, no, it should be Fansien, knows that he is not Truman, this world does exist, and is not a big studio. So he found himself telling stories every day to remind himself that he was from another world, which in itself was a ridiculous move.